I am spending my day building houses for Habitat for Humanity. Homelessness is an issue that is really important to me. I would really like to work towards ending homelessness in my lifetime. But sometimes the problem seems just so big. It's overwhelming. How much of a difference can I really make? I am just one average person. I am not an elected official. I don't own a big business.
One person can make a difference. You never know when your simple act of helping to build houses for the homeless could spark big changes. I was only one person too, and my simple act of getting on a bus changed the course of American history.
You must be Rosa Parks. Our United States Congress called you the First Lady of Civil Rights. I bet learning about your life will be just the inspiration I need today. Rosa Parks' early years. Rosa Parks was born Rosa Louise McCauley in Tuskegee, Alabama on February 4th, 1913. Her parents separated when she was 2, and Rosa and her mother and brother went to live on her grandparents' farm in Pine Level, Alabama. While life on the farm felt happy and safe for Rosa, life outside the farm was dangerous for African Americans. Rosa grew up watching her grandfather fall asleep in a chair on his porch with his shotgun in his lap. Her grandfather, like many African Americans at that time, was terrified by the Ku Klux Klan that marched by their farm at night. The Ku Klux Klan is a hate group that uses threats and violence against African Americans and other minorities. When Rosa was young, the group had about 4 million members in the United States. During the time that Rosa was growing up, the United States had what were known as Jim Crow laws. These laws kept many public places segregated. Segregation is when Black and white people are separated. Many restaurants, schools, and laundromats were for white people only. So, Rosa grew up seeing white people and African Americans being treated very differently. In 1924, 11-year-old Rosa was sent to live with relatives in Montgomery, Alabama. Her mother wanted her to go to a better school, so she sent Rosa to the Montgomery Industrial School for Girls. Rosa spent 4 years at the school and did very well there. The head of the school was Alice White, a Northern woman who taught Rosa to respect herself and to set high goals for herself. Some people were angry that white women from the North were teaching Black girls. Rosa's school was set on fire twice. In 1928, it was forced to close. After that, Rosa went to another all-Black school, but had to drop out and move back to Pine Level to take care of her sick grandma and mother. She cleaned houses for white people and sold fruit on the streets to help make money for her family.
Oh, I remember how difficult it was in those days. As far back as I can remember, I knew there was something wrong with our way of life when people could be mistreated because of the color of their skin.
Rosa Parks certainly faced some challenges in her early life. Let's review what we have learned. Question 1. In what year was Rosa Parks born? A, 1899, B, 1913, C, 1945, D, 1972. The correct answer is B. Rosa was born in 1913. Question 2. What do we call laws that kept African Americans and white people separated? A, Jim Crow laws, B, racism laws, C, freedom laws, D, none of the above. If you answered A, you know that Jim Crow laws were segregation laws. Question 3. Why did Rosa have to drop out of school? A, she needed to care for her sick mother and grandmother. B, she didn't like school. C, she wanted to move to New York City. D, none of the above. The correct answer is A. Rosa dropped out of school to care for sick family members. Rosa Parks' working years. When she was 19 years old, Rosa met and married Raymond Parks. Raymond was very involved with the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which is also known as the NAACP. The NAACP is the oldest and largest civil rights group in the United States. Raymond held NAACP meetings in their home and focused his efforts on helping African Americans who had been wrongly accused of crimes. Many of NAACP's members brought guns to the meetings to protect themselves. They knew that fighting for civil rights for African Americans was very dangerous. Rosa knew how hard the group was working towards the goal of equality for African Americans. She also saw firsthand how dangerous that idea could be. In the early 1930s, fewer than 1 in 10 African Americans graduated from high school. So, earning a high school diploma was a very big deal for Rosa. After earning her degree, she took small sewing jobs to help make ends meet. In 1941, Rosa got a job as a secretary at Maxwell Field Army Base in Montgomery. Rosa liked this job because President Franklin D. Roosevelt had ended segregation on military bases, so African Americans and white people could work side by side as equals. However, it really bothered Rosa that at the end of the workday, she had to ride home on a segregated bus. In the 1940s and 1950s, most public buses in practice had 3 sections of seating. One for whites in the front, one for African Americans in the back, and a middle section that African Americans could sit in only if no white people needed the seats. African Americans always had to enter the bus through the door at the back of the bus. Through these years, Rosa had to deal with the humiliation of being treated as a second-class citizen when riding the bus. She also became more involved in the fight for civil rights. In 1943, Rosa joined the NAACP herself and even became the secretary of her local chapter. She typed the notes from every meeting, wrote letters, and organized meetings and events. Rosa let people know about the violence that was being committed against African Americans all over the South. She also helped African Americans register to vote. Each voter needs to be registered or have their name on the list in order to cast a vote on election day. Rosa was concerned because there was 50,000 African Americans living in Montgomery, but only 31 of them were registered to vote. It was difficult for African Americans to register to vote because they had to take a very difficult test that white people did not have to take. Rosa first took the test in 1943, but it took 3 tries for Rosa to finally receive her registration card in 1945. It had taken her 3 tries to register to vote, but she was determined.
I knew that African Americans needed to vote in order to have our voices heard. I wanted to be known as a person who is concerned about freedom and equality and justice and prosperity for all people.
Learning about how much Rosa helped in the fight for civil rights is inspiring me to continue fighting for my dream of ending homelessness. Let's review what we have learned about the life of Rosa Parks. Question 1. In what year did Rosa join the NAACP? A. 1923, B. 1934, C. 1943, D. Rosa never joined the NAACP. The correct answer is C. Rosa joined the NAACP in 1943. Question 2. Which U.S. president ended segregation on U.S. military bases? A. Woodrow Wilson, B. Calvin Coolidge, C. John F. Kennedy, D. Franklin D. Roosevelt. If you answer D, you know that Franklin D. Roosevelt ended segregation on military bases. Question 3. What made it difficult for African Americans to register to vote in the 1940s? A. There was a difficult test to pass. B. There were very few registration offices. C, it was not difficult for African Americans to register to vote. D, none of the above. The correct answer is A, African Americans had to pass a difficult test. Rosa Parks gets involved in civil rights. After several years, Rosa had to leave her job at the military base to care for sick family members. She cleaned houses and took sewing jobs to make money for her family. Civil rights were still on Rosa's mind, and her frustration with bus segregation was growing. One day, Rosa went to get on a local bus. When the back door opened, she could see that it was so crowded that some African American riders were standing on the stairs. There were just too many people. So, Rosa decided to enter the bus through the front door to avoid the crowd. As she walked down the aisle, the bus driver ordered Rosa to get off the bus and re-enter through the back door. She refused. The driver began to yank her off the bus and ordered her to leave. Rosa left the bus, but that incident left a big impression on her. After that, Rosa began making more connections within the civil rights community. One couple even paid for Rosa to attend a 10-day training workshop at a school called Highlander in Tennessee. The workshop taught people to fight for workers' rights and equal rights for African Americans. Students from all over the United States attended the school's workshops. Martin Luther King Jr. had even attended Highlander workshops. Rosa Parks was 42 years old when she attended Highlander in 1955. Those 10 days changed the way she saw the world. The workshop showed Rosa what it was like to work and live among people who did not care about skin color. All people at the workshop were treated with dignity and respect. At the end of the workshop, all of the students were given this assignment: figure out what might make change in their town or city. Rosa left Tennessee feeling recharged and ready to work for justice and equality.
I also left that workshop determined to do what was right. I have learned over the years that when one's mind is made up, this diminishes fear. Knowing what must be done does away with fear.
Rosa Parks really showed us all what it means to believe in freedom and justice for everyone. Let's review what we've just learned about her amazing life. Here's question 1. What kind of work did Rosa Parks do after she left her job at the military base? A, she took sewing jobs. B, she cleaned houses. C, she was a teacher. D, A and B. The correct answer is D. Rosa sewed and cleaned houses. Question 2. What famous civil rights leader also attended Highlander? A, Malcolm X. B, John Lewis. C, Martin Luther King Jr. D, all of the above. If you answered C, you know that Martin Luther King Jr. attended Highlander. Question 3. How old was Rosa Parks when she attended the 10-day workshop at Highlander? A, 25 years old. B, 30 years old. C, 42 years old. D, 55 years old. The correct answer is C. Rosa was 42 when she attended Highlander. Rosa Parks gets arrested. Once she returned home, Rosa took a new job at a department store. Many days Rosa walked to work instead of riding the segregated buses. After her experience at the workshop, riding in the back of the bus bothered Rosa even more. On Tuesday, December 1st, 1955, Rosa Parks left work and decided to take the bus home. She walked down the block to catch the Cleveland Avenue bus. As she got on the bus and paid her fare, she realized that the driver that day was the same driver who had forced her off the bus 12 years earlier. Rosa said nothing to him and took her seat in the section reserved for black riders. The bus quickly filled up. Soon, there were no empty seats in the section for white people. One white man was forced to stand up to ride the bus. When the bus driver saw the white man standing, he yelled for Rosa and the other African American riders in her row to get up and move out of their seats to open it up for the white man.
I remember the bus driver yelling, "Move, y'all, I want those seats." At first, no one moved. Then the driver yelled again, "Y'all better make it light on yourself and let me have those seats." The other African American riders moved. I let them pass by but did not get up. Instead, I slid over to the window seat in the row. The driver came to the back of the bus and asked me if I was going to stand up. "No," I replied. The bus driver then said that he was going to have me arrested. "Arrest me for sitting on the bus?" I said, "You may do that."
The bus was silent. But Rosa was thinking about all of the years of mistreatment and violence she and other African Americans had suffered. The police came and led Rosa off the bus. She was taken to City Hall. She asked for a drink of water but was refused because the only water fountain was for whites only. Rosa called home. By now, word of her arrest had made it through the community. Members of the NAACP paid her bail. Rosa knew that she was going to face a trial. But the local president of the NAACP, Ed Nixon, asked Rosa to consider bringing a lawsuit against the Montgomery bus company. The lawsuit would ask judges to make a ruling about the seating rules on public buses. At first, Rosa didn't know what to do. If she brought a lawsuit, she would likely lose her job at the department store. She and her family might even face violent attacks. But Rosa really wanted segregation in the United States to end. She wanted African Americans to enjoy the same freedoms as white people. She said yes. The NAACP knew that Rosa was the right person for the cause. She had never been arrested before and was a very hard-working member of the community. Rosa felt that she might win the case.
I knew that white people couldn't point to me and say there was anything I had done to deserve such treatment except to be born black.
Rosa's lawyer, Fred Gray, agreed to take on her case for free. He knew that Rosa would need the entire African American community to support her. The idea for a boycott of the bus company was born. A boycott would mean that African Americans would refuse to ride the buses in Montgomery for a single day. The hope was that this would make the bus company realize how much they needed African American passengers. It was also hoped that the bus companies would realize that they need to treat African American passengers with dignity and respect if they wanted them to return. The bus boycott began on December 5th, 1955. This was the day that Rosa Parks was to go to court about her arrest. Rosa and Mr. Gray were nervous. Would the boycott work? Their question was answered by the empty buses that rolled through the streets of Montgomery on December 5th, 1955. The African American community had united and their boycott was a huge success. African Americans walked to school and work. The leaders of the boycott had even arranged for private cars and vans, many from churches, to carry people where they needed to go. African American cab drivers in the city decided to charge only what the bus normally charged, 10 cents a ride. The Montgomery bus boycott lasted for more than one day. It lasted for more than a year. The bus boycott had a huge impact on the bus company's business because more than 75% of the people riding buses in Montgomery were African American. The bus boycott was considered a major turning point in the fight for civil rights in the United States. Rosa Parks showed true courage in standing up for what she believed in. Let's review what we just learned. Question 1. On what day in 1955 was Rosa Parks arrested? A. September 2nd. B. October 31st. C. December 1st. D. December 31st. The correct answer is C. Rosa was arrested on December 1st, 1955. Question 2. How long did the Montgomery bus boycott last? A, 1 day. B, 3 days. C, 3 weeks. D, more than 1 year. If you answered D, you know that the bus boycott lasted for more than a year. Question 3. At the time of the boycott, what percentage of bus riders were African American? A, 10%. B, 25%. C, 50%. D, 75%. The correct answer is D, 75% of the bus riders were African American. Rosa Parks' legacy and the Supreme Court decision. When the Rosa Parks trial began on December 5, 1955, Rosa's lawyer knew that she would be found guilty. In fact, he never even presented her side of the story to the judges. Rosa was found guilty and was fined $14. Rosa's lawyer had planned for this to happen because he had a much bigger plan in mind. Now that Rosa had been found guilty, he could appeal her verdict to a higher court. When lawyers appeal a verdict, they tell a higher court why they think the original verdict wasn't fair and ask the new court to hear their client's side of the story. Rosa's lawyer wanted the higher court to hear Rosa's story from Rosa herself.
People always say that I didn't give up my seat because I was tired, but that isn't true. No, the only tired I was tired of giving in.
While Rosa waited for the higher court to hear her case, she kept herself busy by traveling to different churches and NAACP meetings to tell her story and work for civil rights. While Rosa's case was tied up in the State Court of Appeals, the Supreme Court of the United States issued a verdict on another case related to segregation on public buses on November 13, 1956. The court ruled that segregated buses were unconstitutional. As a result, Martin Luther King Jr. called for an end to the bus boycott, and on December 21, 1956, Rosa was now ready to ride the bus again. This time, a photographer from Look magazine came along to capture the moment. Rosa got on the same Cleveland Avenue bus she was riding at the time of her arrest. The same bus driver was driving. Rosa sat down in one of the seats at the front of the bus as the photographer took her picture. Although she was considered a heroine in the African American community, life was not easy for Rosa. She found it difficult to find a job. Rosa and her husband decided to move to Detroit to be near Rosa's brother Sylvester. Rosa got a quiet job sewing aprons at the Stockton Sewing Company and continued her work for civil rights. She even attended Martin Luther King's famous "I Have a Dream" speech in Washington in 1963. In 1987, Rosa founded the Rosa and Raymond Parks Institute for Self-Development in Detroit. The goal of the institute was to provide programs aimed at helping young people continue their education. As she got older and the civil rights movement in the United States made more progress, Rosa Parks' achievements began to be formally recognized. In 1996, President Bill Clinton awarded Rosa the Presidential Medal of Freedom. In 1999, Rosa received the Congressional Gold Medal, and Time magazine recognized her as one of the 20 most important people of the 20th century.
Show them when I got the Essence Award. Eddie Murphy introduced me.
That's right. Here is Rosa Parks receiving the Essence Award in 1993.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor to present the 1993 Essence Award to someone who in many ways made it possible for all of us to have an evening as dignified as this, Miss Rosa Parks.
In 2000, the city of Montgomery opened the Rosa Parks Library and Museum. At the age of 79, Rosa wrote her autobiography called Rosa Parks, My Story. She also wrote another book titled Dear Mrs. Parks, a dialogue with today's youth. In 1994, she published her third book, Quiet Strength. Rosa Parks died on October 24, 2005, at the age of 92. Her coffin was brought to the U.S. Capitol in Washington so that people could come and pay their respects. No woman had ever been given this honor before. Rosa Parks' courage and actions made a huge difference for many Americans. Let's review what we've learned about her incredible life. Question 1. Which U.S. president awarded Rosa Parks the Presidential Medal of Freedom? A. Lyndon B. Johnson. B. Jimmy Carter. C. Ronald Reagan. D. Bill Clinton. The correct answer is D. President Bill Clinton awarded Rosa the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Question 2. Where did people come to pay respects to Rosa Parks after she died? A. The Rosa Parks Museum. B. The U.S. Capitol. C. The family home of Rosa Parks. D. None of the above. The correct answer is B. People came to the U.S. Capitol to pay respects to Rosa Parks. Thinking question. The actions of Rosa Parks led to great changes. What causes do you believe in and feel strongly about?